They are the Native Americans, the original Americans who occupied this country before the first white settlers. Today, hundreds of tribes of Native Americans are on Indian reservations scattered across the U.S., striking a fine balance between thriving in the modern world and holding tight to their past. Native Americans hold a deep-rooted desire to protect the heritage, culture, and language of their ancestors.
The nations are all different. Their songs, their culture, their religion, language. There were 500 different nations, 500 different languages, 500 different cultures in this land at one time. And everyone tries to preserve that. That's their identity.
If we don't preserve that history, that culture of that specific tribe, we're losing out on something that may enrich the lives of our children, allowing these kids to come into the school systems to learn about the other cultures.
This especially holds true for the Delaware Nation. Once one of the most powerful Indian tribes in the East, occupying the entire Atlantic coast from Virginia to Massachusetts, the Delaware Nation is known as the original or grandfather tribe.
The original name of the Delaware Nation was the Lenape. We were the Lenape, which means the original people. Before any of the colonists came here, that's what we were referred to. Many of our neighboring tribes called us the grandfathers, and there were many offshoots, many sub-tribes that came from our tribe. Being on the East Coast for at least 12,000 years is what they say.
As the very first Native American tribe to sign a treaty with the U.S. government, the Delaware Nation was at one time even promised to receive statehood and congressional representation.
We were the first to start the treaty process. In 1683, we signed a treaty with William Penn and created the city of brotherly love, which is now known as Philadelphia. And then, of course, we made the first treaty with the United States in 1778. In the first treaty in 1778, Chief White Eyes went to the Continental Congress and offered a military alliance to the United States in the Revolutionary War in exchange to be the 14th state in the Union and to have congressional representation.
There is special wording that says that the Delaware Nation would have their own state, would have their own seat in Congress. And myself, I have never come across another treaty where this was promised to a tribe. And in this instance, the United States government desperately needed our help to preserve themselves.
We entered into a military alliance. We helped them win. Chief White Eyes became Colonel White Eyes in the Army and was subsequently shot after the war before he could fulfill the treaty.
After being driven even farther westward by settlers and government control, the descendants of the Delaware Nation today live on their reservation in Oklahoma. As a people proud of their history and heritage, the Lenape Delaware tribe is focused on preserving and expanding their culture, language, and religion through economic development and education.
As a child, I grew up hearing about our history, hearing about what we needed to do to help preserve our traditions, to preserve our songs, to preserve our language. And having had that start in life, naturally, I want to go ahead and do that. And that's what I've done. I studied in anthropology, I studied Native American studies, museum studies. And my focus always was to come back and help my people, to help preserve our history, to help preserve our culture.
I would hope that people would learn a little bit more about their United States history and how beneficial my nation was to creating the United States. King George came back after the war and basically stated that the reason the Americans won the war is because the Delaware Nation joined them.
Today, the future for the tribe looks bright as tribal members step into the spotlight to tackle some of the toughest issues we face today. The tribe is helping develop alternative sources of energy and prioritize the preservation of natural resources. They're using funds from a highly successful casino operation to build infrastructure and improve roads on their tribal land. Casino profits are also being used to start new businesses that employ Native Americans, as well as open doors for entrepreneurs to make new products and compete in today's marketplace.
By giving them the computer help, the marketing, the accounting, and things like that they don't have available to them, plus the startup capital, to the point where at the end of that 3-year period, they should be able to go out on their own and have a thriving business. It will be unique in that they will have the pride and the know-how of how a business really gets started.
And I'd also like to see people write their congressman, ask them to examine the first treaty. We'd like to fulfill that treaty some way, somehow. I don't expect we're going to get our state, but I think if we can at least get acknowledged that occurred and how beneficial it was, that would be very good.
Today's Native Americans are applying the knowledge and skills needed to compete in a global marketplace while still preserving the history and culture of their people. As one of the original and most powerful Indian tribes of America, the Delaware Nation is today a proud people striving to preserve their history, language, and culture on their tribal land in Oklahoma.
There's 1,400 members in the Delaware Nation today. It is a cultural renaissance today, and we're trying to fulfill that and bring our nation back to its cultural roots.
Known as the original or grandfather tribe of all tribes, the Delaware Nation has played a key role in the development of the United States, with one of the most colorful histories of any culture that still exists.
Our correct name is the Lenape, is that we were once a very, very great entity. We covered most of the eastern seaboard, and a lot of the tribes that were known in the history books are actually our sub-tribes.
Today, through its Delaware Nation Library, Museum, and Cultural Preservation Office, the Delaware Nation is seeking to preserve and protect its cultural artifacts and archaeological sites for future generations. At the same time, profits from its vibrant casino operation are being used to train and educate its youth to compete in a global economy.
We're talking about classes, we're talking about any number of things to make sure that the heritage that we have will not be forgotten. And what is the heritage? It's our language.
People see that we are building economic development not only for our people, but for the communities here in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a growing and thriving state, and I like to think that we're part of the reason that it is growing and thriving today.
The Delaware Nation is striving to revitalize its community through positive growth, socially, economically, and educationally, so that its culture and history will never be forgotten. For more information, visit DelawareNation.com.